So I've mentioned on a few videos that I'm a fan of the director Rene Perez. He's a low-budget B-movie filmmaker who is very conservative. His movies have tended to be a little bit on the hokey side, but I still like them as a kind of a guilty pleasure, and there are some things that I genuinely do like about his films. And I was looking for a recent movie that he'd put out, and I came across his own kind of little streaming site called Rebellion Flicks, where it houses a few films that I presume have not got any kind of general distribution. So I kind of joined up. The actual film I wanted wasn't on there, but I thought I would have a look at what was on there and obviously check them out and review them. And I suspect the reason why these films haven't got more of a general release is because they are more politically motivated, shall we say, than some of the other movies that have gone out to sort of general release and kind of distributors and things like that. So the one we're talking about today is called OnlyFans Allowed. And obviously that's a play on the OnlyFans brand. The story focuses on this woman who is a kind of right-wing political activist, but she kind of goes undercover as such by posing as an OnlyFans girl. They don't say that brand name, they just say some streaming site or something. So she kind of, on the surface of it, looks like it's, you know, she's doing strips and all that kind of thing. But once you're kind of subscribed, then she's kind of goes basically into kind of political activism. And the elites, this kind of, body above the government, called, I think, Monarch, they say they're called, have discovered that this is what she's doing, and she's growing this kind of fan base. So they want to discredit her name and take her out the picture before she becomes too sort of popular, and they devise a plan to do that by, and you're going to love this, by effectively getting one of her fans and injecting him with an overdose of the vaccine, which turns him into a kind of a rage monster. They slap like a kind of sort of Jason Voorhees style mask on him and basically send him out to kill her. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So obviously it's very, very politically motivated, but let's put a pin in that. I mean, look, it's a film, it's a piece of entertainment. We'll talk about the politics a bit. I do try and avoid politics on the channel. Sometimes you can't help but have to deal with it. But let's talk about it just as a film first of all, and what works in it. And you know, I actually kind of applaud these kind of right-wing channels who feel like they're, or production companies, like, you know, for example, the Daily Wire has done something similar, where they're producing their own entertainment for that audience, and you know, that's good if you ask me. They don't feel like they're being serviced, and so they want to provide entertainment which obviously speaks to that political base. Absolutely fine. But let's look at it in the context. This is just a film, okay? Some of the kind of the ideas here are very over the top, but it is just a film. This is not a, though it is a lot of political language and almost lecturing, I would say. It is just a movie. I don't think it's necessarily trying to say this is the reality of what's going on. At least I don't think so. I have to say, I kind of found the idea quite fun that political elites would create a serial killer from scratch, basically, to take out a political rival or a political insurgent, maybe. I thought it was quite a fun idea in that concept. You know, it's quite a unique idea for a movie to have this you know, politically motivated slasher film where the guy is, you know, a kind of Jason Voorhees type, but he is created by one political class to go after someone on the other side. I think it's a good idea. The movie is relatively short, only runs about an hour, so it sort of doesn't outstay its welcome. The horror element is the minority of the screen time, I would say, though. I'll come on to that. But when we do get our horror element, I think it's done fairly well. It is the old, same old Rennie Perez locations, this kind of this forest area that a lot of his movies are kind of taking place in, this kind of fallen tree that basically stars in nearly every movie. And we've got that kind of, that Rennie Perez washed out kind of look that it's very sort of that stylistic touch. The movie does have some fairly kind of violent scenes that are achieved with some good practical effects. There's not loads of kills in this, but the kills that we do see are quite brutal and fairly graphic, and done to a good effect in you know, in regards to the VFX. I think the killer looks pretty cool, and it's kind of tragic because this has been put on him. This is some innocent guy who has been basically turned into a killer. So it's, you know, obviously again, it's an interesting concept in itself. And some of the kind of the political ideas that are very, very fanciful. If you kind of look at it from a kind of like a science fiction perspective, and, you know, a hyper reality, there's some kind of like, okay, it's some fun ideas here that you could say from an entertainment point of view. If you're not taking the kind of like the politics that it's putting out there too seriously, you can kind of have some fun with the kind of the concepts. There is a lot of that. Looking at what doesn't work, maybe, okay, I'm just going to spin the wheels here a little bit. I would say if you're an American conservative and you're fed up with a kind of like the sort of woke, if you want to call it that, agenda that is that you feel that is on that being put out by a lot of Hollywood, I do understand that, but maybe the idea is just to have films that are kind of don't really have that political kind of edge to it, and aren't kind of pandering one way or the other. And that's the thing. What this movie does is the pendulum swings way in the other direction here. The bulk of this running time. Now, the idea here is this woman is posing as an OnlyFans girl, but when she's actually on air, she's just giving a lot of rhetoric in regards to her political beliefs and things like this. And the movie spends a lot of time with this woman lecturing her audience, i.e. us as the audience, about certain political ideologies and beliefs. So you're feeling like a lot of this movie ends up being kind of like a lecture, to be honest. And, you know, it's some fairly out there ideas, to be honest. And even some of the kind of the stuff that happens, which isn't just sitting there looking at a computer screen lecturing the kind of the audience. For example, there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where our main sort of character bumps into like another woman in this forest who's out with her son. And this other woman's like, oh, are you vaccinated? You're not. Oh, you better stay away from my son then. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't, I don't think that really makes sort of sense, because even if she wasn't vaccinated, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you a virus, even if you are vaccinated. I didn't really understand that sort of, that kind of like, that doesn't really make sense on either side to me. And it's like that it was so cartoonishly over the top. I'm thinking, okay, let's not take it too seriously. This is kind of like a, as I say, like a over-exaggeration, a science fiction version of these kind of expanded ideologies, I would suggest. At least that's my interpretation of it. But nonetheless, it does feel quite lectury, you know. even for someone who may agree with a lot of the sort of the political right. And then if you're watching it just for a kind of a piece of entertainment here, I think this setup is an interesting idea, and I actually kind of quite like it in a sort of a fun science fiction, horror, fantasy idea. But it's a lot of this runtime. It's a short film. It's just like lecturing, and I'm thinking, okay, so this movie is clearly made for that sort of conservative, American conservative audience. But then maybe they probably would already agree with a lot of this stuff that's being said. So it kind of feels like you're just sort of saying stuff which is who you're trying to convince, sort of thing. It almost feels like a little bit of a waste, to be honest. I mean, surely the idea here is you'd want to, if your idea here is to convince people who are maybe a bit unsure and maybe centrist, you want to be a bit more accessible, perhaps. Again, I'm theorising what the motivation is for something like this. Anyway, so let's just put that political stuff aside. Is it an interesting movie to watch as an entertainment? I think it has some interesting ideas. I actually quite like the idea of a political kind of like backstory to as how this killer ends up there, and the reasoning and the method how he's got there and stuff like that. I do think it spends a lot of time meandering about, just lecturing the audience about stuff, and then having these little quotes from people come up. Ends up being a little less entertaining in that regard, and I think there could have been more done with the actual story narrative a little bit. But yeah, it is what it is. It's somewhat entertaining. It's well shot. It's technically, I think it's quite proficient. The gore, the killer looks cool. If you're a slasher fan and you're certainly a conservative, then I think you probably would enjoy it. But I do feel it spends a little bit too much time, on hyperbole, to be honest with you. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? Would you see it? If I remember, I will leave the Rebellion website, if you do want to watch it, in the description box there. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are if you've seen it, and I look forward to seeing you next time. It's a 4 out of 10.